So my talk is actually going to be on using OSPool resources for teaching and education. Shomik's talk, which is right after mine, will actually be using some of these resources for a hands-on demo. So I'm still very much covering kind of what you could use these resources for. So jumping right in, the Open Science Pool provides a free, ready-to-use platform for instructors who are teaching high-throughput computing concepts for academic courses, conference workshops, and other events. Why might you want to use OSPool resources for your next event? Well, the first one is that it's free to academic, nonprofit, and government institutions. There's no allocation necessary to use these resources. It's easy to access. There's limited to no interaction required with working with OSG staff. And there's many use cases that you could use these resources for. So for example, if you're a professor and teaching a course, or if you're attending a workshop and want to lead a hands-on tutorial, or perhaps you just want to do an in-lab group training amongst your colleagues at your home institution. You can use these resources also for any research domain. So there's a tremendous amount of use cases that you could use our tools for. Additionally, perhaps you want to provide attendees with a real-world experience on a national scale computing system. So maybe you want to teach your attendees about things like job submission using HT Condor, running large workflows, or how best to manage data, or good computing practices, so on and so forth. As we've mentioned before, we have a fantastic new service, which is our OSPool Notebooks. Our OSPool Notebooks use a Jupyter interface and allow researchers to interact with an OSPool access point, HT Condor, and optionally the Open Science Pool. And this is just a screenshot of the interface. And as you can see, I have a notebook pulled up, and in that notebook, I'm downloading data for a bioinformatic analysis. So right in my notebook, I can both take notes, which is very helpful when you're leading an event to be able to have your attendees have notes, but then also be able to run various lines of code. OSPool Notebooks can be launched anytime. You do not need to let staff know that you're going to be using them. Researchers with guest accounts can submit HT Condor jobs to a small execution test pool. So in this, after this talk, Shomik is going to be leading a hands-on tutorial and actually submitting jobs using a guest account to a small execution test pool. Researchers with full accounts on the Open Science Pool can submit HT Condor jobs directly to the Open Science Pool. And I'll get a little bit more into the differences between guest accounts and full accounts in a minute. The real advantage of this interface, which we've mentioned before, is that it really lowers the barrier of entry for new users. You can click files, you can drag them, you can go to File and Save to save files. So it's a really great way to bring and make users that are perhaps not as comfortable with different computing concepts, really helps lower the barrier of entry and empower them so that they feel comfortable moving forward and exploring on their own. Here are just 3 events that we have used these resources for. So starting out over on the left, there was a distributed computing workshop at the African School of Fundamental and Applied Physics, which was held in South Africa last year. We're particularly proud of this event because the instructors for this event worked almost independently of OSG staff. They did notify us that they were going to be having this workshop, and we were happy to help them and introduce our resources to them and answer any questions that they had. But beyond that, they developed their course materials and led this fantastic multi-day workshop that had about 50 attendees using our resources to actually teach concepts in their domain. So this is another fantastic reason to use OSPool resources for your next event, is that you can teach people within your domain, which is much more scalable than the facilitation team putting on events. Additionally, I am not an expert in topics like physics. So the best way to share knowledge is within your domain, and these tools give empower users within their own research domain to teach the concept to others in their area. Up next, we had the African Centers of Excellence in Bioinformatics Global Consortium meeting, which was also held last year in Uganda. And I was privileged enough to be the instructor for this workshop. But I'm going to be honest, there was some challenges with this workshop. So for example, there was going to be language barriers. So asking attendees to create an account on their own, upload SSH keys, it was going to be quite a challenge. Additionally, not all of the attendees had internet at home. So had I wanted them to have accounts in advance, full accounts, they would have had to go out to campus, log into a campus machine because they perhaps didn't have internet at home. So the real advantage to using the OSPool Notebook guest accounts was that on the day of the event, I was able to welcome any last minute registration, and anyone who wanted to attend this workshop was able to come, no notice needed. And we were able to log in, practice submitting one HT Condor bioinformatic job, and then scale up to submitting many bioinformatic jobs. And so at the end of the day, researchers left having carried out hands-on practice, running bioinformatics jobs, and also having thought about how to use HT Condor and high throughput computing to apply to their own research. So from an instructor perspective, the OSPool Notebooks with the guest accounts was absolutely a fantastic resource to use. Over on the right, we have an image from the Great Plains Network annual meeting, which was held about a month or two ago in Missouri of this year. And I have this example up on the slide because this was an example of kind of just a general topics course. So this workshop, we discussed how to use the open science pool, things like job submission, very general topics. There's a really wide audience. So people coming from all over the different countries, or sorry, all over the different states. And so it was really great to be able to use these resources to just teach general high throughput computing concepts and concepts related to the open science pool. So hopefully you can kind of see how you can use these resources for not only, teaching within perhaps your own specific domain, such as physics or the life sciences, but also perhaps if you want to convey more general knowledge to your attendees. So let's jump into getting started using OSPool resources for your next event. The first question is, what is your next event? So up on the slide, I have just some examples of perhaps what your next event might be depending on your role. So if you're a professor or perhaps related to teaching staff at your institution, do you want to teach an academic or otherwise course that could benefit from high throughput computing resources? Are you a research principal investigator, or a lab manager, or just a researcher within a lab? If you are, do you want to explore if high throughput computing, HT Condor, or the open science pool is right for you or your lab's analyses? Do you want to host a group training to share best practices amongst your group, or to share domain computing knowledge with others? So for example, maybe if you work in a research group, every time you get a new cohort of graduate students, perhaps you have a 2-hour training where you all log in and you boot up a guest OSPool notebook, and you log in and you practice things like reproducibility and other skills that are going to be really important for those underneath you or those graduate students to learn, so that they're developing good practices right from the get-go of joining your group. Lastly, perhaps are you writing a grant and want to consider if using OSPool resources are for you? So this is another reason that you could use our OSPool notebooks, or just the open science pool in general, just to explore if you want to include them in perhaps your next grant application. Lastly, if you're a student, do you want to learn more about high throughput computing, job submission, and a national scale computing system? Maybe you just want to enhance your general knowledge as you're on your journey of learning more about computing. So whatever your next event is, we have a recommended process. And this is just an overview. This process is quite flexible and can end up being really what you want it to be. The biggest thing is that just know that the facilitation team is here to help you along this journey. So you are not alone. You have a whole team helping you and helping to answer questions about our resources. So starting out, the first steps we recommend are to explore our tools and to conduct initial testing of your event materials. So to kind of elaborate on this, the big question that you're going to want to ask yourself is, can your event be structured to use high throughput computing resources? So that's why you're going to want to explore our resources and see if they're going to be right for you and for your event. So for example, if you're kind of thinking down the road, perhaps you're wanting to teach an event and you ultimately want the attendees to end up using OSPool resources, the Open Science Pool has some recommendations for job sizes and various job shapes, which this table that Christina showed earlier just outlines some of those recommendations that we have. So thinking about, always the long-term goal of your attendees in your workshop and just making sure that your materials and your event will benefit from this. Up next, you're going to want to evaluate if using guest accounts or full accounts for your attendees is more appropriate. So guest accounts use our OSPool Notebook service. So attendees can launch an OSPool Notebook at any time and practice HT job submission with smaller workflows. Like I said earlier, you don't need to let OSG staff know that you're doing this in advance. If you want to, you're welcome to, but you don't need to let us know. You can boot up a notebook, walk through various demonstrations. And the great thing is that, like I said earlier, it's a very friendly interface. You can click and drag files. There's also some software pre-installed like HT so on and so forth. So this is a really great option for having a low barrier of entry, but it also has the limitation of if you want to submit thousands upon thousands of jobs, this is probably not the best option for your event. Instead, you might want to consider having your attendees request full accounts. If you pursue this option, you would essentially provide a list of your attendees to OSG staff in advance, and then you would have them request accounts. And as your attendees request accounts, the facilitation team will approve them. So this does require a little bit of pre-planning to give the time to the facilitation staff to approve accounts and to add them to our system. The advantage of full accounts is that you can submit full-scale, high-throughput computing workflows that will run out on the Open Science Pool. So if you want, you can use this OSPool Notebook, very clickable, friendly interface to submit potentially thousands upon thousands of jobs. Or if you want your attendees to get experience with the black and white terminal, uploading things like SSH keys, you can also use a regular terminal interface. Accounts at the end of your event, these full accounts will be deactivated, but attendees can request to have their account stay active. So if you hold an event, you teach them all about the great benefits of high throughput computing, HT the Open Science Pool, they can request to continue using those resources. So it's a really great way to transition people to a national scale computing system like this. And when you have an account, a full account, you get access to all of the resources that we've been mentioning earlier, our access point where you can log in and stage data, the Open Science Pool, which is the compute capacity actually running your jobs, as well as the Open Science Data Federation for your storage capacity. Up next is kind of the last minute details prior to the event. So as I said earlier, if your attendees will benefit from full accounts, you will have to have them request accounts in advance of the event, and the OSG staff will approve them as they come in. So it's best to do this at least several days ahead of time, just to kind of make sure that we have time to approve them. However, most accounts will be approved within an hour or two. Then you will also want to just test all of your materials. That's just good practice whenever you're kind of running any sort of computing workshop. When it comes to preparing your materials, please know that we do have some instructional resources available for you to use. So these are publicly available. These slides are uploaded to the website, so these links will work, but if you have trouble accessing any of these links, please let us know. We're happy to share them. So we have things like an introduction to the open science pool and our policies as slides. We have various trainings and recordings for different research domains or different skills that HT Condor can do that perhaps you might want to watch one of our trainings so that you can then convey that to your audience. We have hands-on tutorials available on our websites. And then over on the right, we have a worksheet. So this worksheet is all about scaling out your computing. So you would be welcome to use this worksheet to help explain to a researcher and have them think about how to take their computing research question and to scale it out to something that will run really well on a high throughput system. And then lastly, you will have your event, which is the exciting moment in the end. Your event might be a day workshop. It might be a semester-long course, or perhaps a year-long camp of some sort. Really, the event is up to you. So if you're interested in using OSPool resources for your next event, please feel free to talk to us. The facilitation team will be here all week, and we are absolutely happy to talk to you about your event. We're also available after this conference in case your time is really busy this week. We're available after this conference. We're happy to have a Zoom call and to chat about your event in any way that we can help with it. And then lastly, over on the right, on the Learn More, we do have a guide that just kind of will help you refresh all of this information, the options that are available to you, so on and so forth.